Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be my transfer plans for Game Week 12. They are just initial ideas and there could be some changes heading into the team selection and deadline stream next week. So keep your eyes peeled for those pieces of content and many more videos for UCL Fantasy and FPL over the next couple of weeks. There's also the best wildcard team already out on the channel and also the transfer tips for Game Week 12. There could be updated versions of those podcasts next week. So keep your eyes peeled by smashing the like button and subscribing if you're new. Our aim is to get this to the 200 likes on YouTube and to keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers and beyond. Check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. And it's a great time to sign up because you can get early access by a couple of days compared to usual subscribers and also all viewers. There's also the Discord server, FPL League, Drafthound, as well as Spotify. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. A major disappointment on the Game Week 6 wildcard was the double up in the Arsenal defence. No clean sheet since Game Week 4. They've only been able to keep opponents out in other competitions like the Carabao Cup and Champions League, where they've only conceded one goal in that competition, but in the Premier League, it's just been blank after blank, and that's another 2-pointer for David Raya and co. He's simply not worth the money right now, but with Arsenal's fixture swing from Game Week 12 onwards, I could see them going on a run with most of the key players back. Martin Odegaard made an outstanding return against Chelsea, creating 4 key passes and also making Arsenal tick, but there's still a lack of creativity in other areas of the pitch, and Arsenal are a bit slow in their tempo and predictable this season. But last campaign, we saw something similar where Arsenal ran out of ideas in December, then went to Dubai and had that crazy run after a bit of a mini break for the Gunners. They'll be hoping for more of the same this season, and I think David Raya could still be one of the best goalkeepers in FPL. I was quite surprised by my defenders this week, and Mykolenko kept a clean sheet away from home against West Ham, and in recent meetings at the Olympic Stadium, Everton have got a decent record there, a few 1-0 victories, and this time it was a 0-0 shutout, and that was perfect for me as I only owned Mykolenko, and many of you watching would have started Fabianski, who got 9 points in that game, an additional bonus point granted at the very end of the game week. But I'm very happy with Mykolenko in recent weeks, the clean sheet away from home against Ipswich Town and now West Ham. But after the next 3 game weeks, it gets very tough for the Toffees. They face Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal and Chelsea between game weeks 15 to 18, and that's where Mykolenko is certainly benchable, and you could argue he's a sell from that period onwards. My second defender also kept a clean sheet, and that was Reynate Nuri, one of my free transfers that I made during the deadline stream, and he got a clean sheet. A bit unfortunate not to get an attack and return on top of it, but you could also argue that Southampton should have scored and they were unfortunate with some of the refereeing decisions against them in that particular match. But Wolves deserve the win, and the likes of Nuri, Cunha and Strand Larsen are good FPL assets, especially the first two that I'm very happy I brought into the fold for my FPL team. My final defender though was once again Gabriel, the only disappointment really in my defensive line alongside David Raya, but at least Reynate Nuri and Mykolenko were able to keep the clean sheet, and I think Arsenal would have done the same if they didn't give Pedro Neto so much space for the equaliser. It's usually the midfield which is the strongest part of my FPL team, but that wasn't the case in Game Week 11. Phil Foden blanked yet again this season, only the 1 assist which came against Wolves as a substitute. He has played the full 90 in the last couple of Premier League games, and I think he will come good eventually in this Premier League season, and his recent performances have merited some goal contributions against Bournemouth and Brighton in particular, but it just hasn't turned out that way. It's Tottenham at home next. You could make a case for holding, but when you've got the likes of Saka, Palmer, Salah and Bruno Fernandes, I think those are clearly a step above Phil Foden at this moment in time. Another 2-pointer from him, and Man City lost for the 4th time in a row despite taking the lead. That's the worst spell Pep Guardiola has ever endured as a manager, and City are conceding big chance after big chance in every single match. In fact, that's 6+ big chances in the last 3 matches, which is simply not good enough. Brighton had 8 in total and fully deserved that victory by the end of the match. My second midfielder was Cole Palmer, who was quite disappointing against Arsenal. His performance definitely could have been better. There was one chance where Jackson was through on goal and Palmer passed it to the left. He is a young player. He's going to get better and better. He's already one of the best in this competition, but I do feel in terms of non-penalty goals and assists, he could do even better in the big games. And so far this season, he hasn't scored or assisted against the 4 so-called big 6 sides he has faced, but I think that will certainly change in the next couple of weeks. Maybe not so actually, because Chelsea have one of the best fixture runs until Game Week 20, but I feel Palmer will deliver in these big occasions later this season, and we'll see when that is the case. My third midfielder, though, was a certain Mohamed Salah, another transfer in, and it's about time I did this because last week I discussed this in the team selection video for Gameweek 10. I didn't end up going for him and Cunha, and I kept Haaland for another week, and despite getting a green arrow there, it could have been even bigger if I had just gone for Salah and captained him, which was my plan against Brighton. And of course, with Aston Villa, it seemed like a tough fixture on paper, but Villa have been in really poor form right now, just like Manchester City and Arsenal, and Liverpool took full advantage. They have been the best team in the Premier League so far this season. In terms of the attack, one of the very best in that department, and defensively, they have been rock solid at the back with only 6 goals conceded, and Salah has been by far the best FPL asset, the only player to have reached 100 FPL points so far this season. My final midfielder, though, was Mbeumo, a bit disappointing with only 5 points in a 3-2 thriller, and it was Wissa who stole the show with a brace, but I still think Mbeumo has a lot to offer in the next 2 game weeks. Then we see a fixture swing against Brentford from Game Week 14 onwards. I still think the fixtures look good from an attacking perspective, so keeping Wissa or Mbeumo might be the play. But if you've got an offensive double up, you might want to trim that down, and I think a lot of people will be looking to sell Mbeumo from Game Week 14. Compared to recent weeks, my forward line was slightly disappointing, with Dominic Solanke blanking against Ipswich Town. He was a very popular captaincy choice after a 16-point haul against Aston Villa, and luckily I started him in that game. And if anything, people thought it would have been this game where Solanke would have gotten a brace and possibly an assist on top of it, but it wasn't meant to be. He had one huge chance towards the very end of the game, which he failed to capitalise on, but you have to give Ipswich Town credit. Their first Premier League victory in 22 years, and Spurs are the Robin Hood of the Premier League this season. Crystal Palace and Ipswich Town were winless going into the Spurs game, and of course they both ended up getting the victory. So Solanke is still a decent choice up front, but when you've got Nicholas Jackson, Isak, Watkins, and all the budget forwards I've mentioned in recent videos, it's hard to make a case for Solanke being one of the best forwards in FPL. There could be a time for that this season, but as I mentioned a few weeks ago, I think Solanke is potentially a sell in Game Week 12, and he's certainly benchable against Man City despite their defensive struggles, and Spurs could actually have a few opportunities and score a few goals in the process. My second forward, though, was Cunha, my third and final transfer alongside Salah and Aït-Nouri, and I'm very happy with this pick because I bought him in for Erling Haaland. He outscored him, and on top of that, a captaincy haul. It all made things kind of run on smoothly. So Cunha with a goal and the assist and maximum bonus points. It was a great return against Southampton, but it is Fulham away next, which isn't going to be easy. That's probably one of the toughest fixtures Wolves have until Game Week 18. They remain top of the fixture difficulty rating throughout that time frame. But my final forward, another blanker, was Chris Wood. But you could forgive him because he has been so consistent for me this season. I've had him since Game Week 1, and despite the odd benching, that I've had and been a bit frustrated by leaving his points on the bench, he has been very consistent whilst in my starting 11 as well. On one occasion, he came off the bench for Diogo Jota and got me a good return. So I can really excuse him for this, and it was Newcastle after all, and this is my exact issue with buying Nottingham Forest assets now when they are bottom of the FDR until Game Week 20. They've got some very tough fixtures coming up, like Arsenal and Man City away over the next 3 game weeks, but sandwiched in between is Ipswich Town at home, where Chris Wood could be one of the best captains in Game Week 13. I struck gold with my transfers and captaincy this week. I went for Salah, who scored and assisted against Aston Villa. I think the goal itself was quite fortuitous. Diego Carlos made a huge mistake, but he capitalised, and I think sometimes you just need this luck with your captaincy hauls, and that's 14 points from Mohamed Salah, turned into 28, and that was crucial to securing a green arrow and 69 points for the game week. I also bought Aït-Nouri and Cunha, so the players I sold were Jacob Greaves, who should be available from Game Week 12 onwards. He was red flagged, of course, for the last couple of weeks. Also Morgan Rogers, and the other one was Erling Haaland. So I made a lot of points from my transfers and the captaincy combined, but there were a lot of blanks in my starting 11. Raya, Gabriel, Palmer, Foden, Solanke and Chris Wood. But getting the captain right is so important, and the fact I also bought the likes of Aït-Nouri and Cunha, who returned very well, and then starting Mikalenko over Rico Lewis, these decisions were imperative to securing that green arrow and building upon the progress I've made in the last couple of weeks. I'm now around 600,000, which isn't great, but there has been progress, and that's the most important thing. And now I've only got 1 free transfer. That was one of my biggest dilemmas during the deadline stream because I used all 3 of my available moves, but despite the fact they resulted in that green arrow and also, I'd say, a good long-term structure, it does leave me a bit short-handed during the international break if I get a few injuries, and currently there are 2 yellow flag players in my team, technically 3 actually. That could result in some big problems going into the next couple of weeks. But now let's discuss my Gameweek 12 team selection, and despite the fact that I've only got 1 free transfer, I'm looking to make 2 or 3 moves potentially, take some hits, and be very aggressive in FPL. I can certainly understand the temptation to downgrade Arsenal defenders or Raya in goal, but with the fixtures turning for the better, I think it's probably best to give them a few more weeks, then reassess the situation around Gameweek 14 or 15. If Arsenal haven't kept the clean sheet by then, or haven't improved with their performances or results, it might be time to sell them, especially if you've got 2 or 3 Arsenal defensive coverage. You might want to trim that down, but despite the fact I've got Raya and Gabriel, my current plan is to keep both of them and back the Gunners to turn things around. In recent team selection videos, I have considered the possibility of taking a -4 hit just to improve my defensive line alone, but I might start Mykolenko at home to Brentford, who are one of the highest scorers in the Premier League this season, and every single Brentford game is high scoring. I think both teams will get opportunities, but Everton's attack leaves a lot to be desired, and I think a lot of their success will depend on their defensive performances, and Mykolenko has been decent in the last couple of weeks, but generally disappointing from Gameweek 1. He was one of my first picks in my defensive line, and I think at his price tag he's not too shabby, but with Everton's fixtures turning for the worst fairly soon, as mentioned earlier in this podcast, I don't think Mykolenko is one to really target on the wildcard or with a free transfer, despite the decent returns in the last couple of away matches. My second defender though is Aït-Nouri, and he's facing Fulham away. He might salvage something for a goal or an assist, and he's already got 5 goal contributions this season, and he always looks threatening on that left-hand side, but ideally, I'd start somebody else here, and if I were to take a hit or make a defender transfer, it would be Konate coming in, facing Southampton away, and I think that would be a great move for the long term because Liverpool do face Manchester City and Newcastle over the next 3 gameweeks, which doesn't look particularly great. Other defenders I'm looking at include Mazraoui. Beyond the next 2 gameweeks though, United have a bit of a tough run under Ruben Amorim, who is already in charge, and that could be a major boost for the Red Devils. If I don't make transfers in this position though, I will start Aït-Nouri reluctantly, and maybe he can get something against Fulham, but I very much doubt it. I think Wolves will concede a few goals here, and Aït-Nouri could walk away with only 1 or 2 points. The same could be said about Mykolenko. My third and final defender is Gabriel, who has been shocking since Gameweek 5 when he scored against Manchester City. Even from set pieces, he looks a bit less threatening because from the corners and free kicks, Gabriel isn't really getting on the end of these occasions so much, and maybe teams have figured out what Arsenal are trying to do from these set pieces, but I still think Gabriel will find a way because he is such an aerial presence from set pieces and open play, so I really back him to get a few more goals in this campaign. It's just a matter of when, and facing Nottingham Forest, who Arsenal got the double over last season, they were very close games though, 2-1 at home and 2-1 away, so I think it's going to be a very close call, but Arsenal can keep the clean sheet, and if they're able to do so and secure the victory, this could be the start of a great run for the Gunners. The midfield looks particularly strong this week, with Mohamed Salah facing Southampton away. This is triple captain territory, but it's not the only chance you'll get at nailing this chip throughout the season. I already played it back in Game Week 2, but if I still had the chip available, I'd seriously consider using it this week on somebody like Salah, but he's not the only triple captain opportunity you've got in Game Week 12 in my opinion, and I do have a sneaky feeling he might not produce the same level of returns he has done in previous weeks, despite having the best fixture on paper, and he's also got a break over the next 2 weeks because Egypt haven't called him up, so that is another major boost and also a reason why you may want to triple captain Salah or at least put the armband on the Egyptian. My second midfielder isn't yellow flagged in FPL right now, but he probably will be in the next couple of days, so this video is recorded quite early on the Wednesday, so just bear that in mind. But Semenyo has withdrawn from the Ghana squad and he's going to be working on a slight injury he's got, so they're kind of taking him out as a precaution and hoping he kind of recovers fully from this issue. But I believe Semenyo will be available. I provided the latest updates on his injury in my recent FPL videos and podcasts. He does face Brighton at home next. This could be a very high scoring game, and despite Evanilson being the standout Bournemouth attacker in recent weeks, I still think Semenyo could be the most dangerous. As a midfielder, he's got the advantage of getting clean sheet points and the extra point for scoring a goal, and he also takes so many shots every single week. I know most of them are off target or blocked, but Semenyo is always a danger, especially in home matches, so I'd be very happy to start him as part of a midfield 5 in Game Week 12. my third midfielder is another captaincy option in Cole Palmer, facing Leicester City away. He is yellow flagged, but just like most of the yellow flags we're getting, I think most of them are precautionary and he should be available and start in the upcoming game week. So I'm not too concerned about this issue. You might want to captain Salah instead, and that's completely fine. But I think Palmer could rival him and potentially surpass Salah in game week 12. It's a great fixture, and Leicester City have left a lot to be desired this season. They conceded 4 to Arsenal, 3 to Man United, and they could be battered here by Chelsea. Enzo Maresca's former club as well. He knows them, to a very high level, and Cole Palmer is one of the best captaincy options in most game weeks, and I think this rotational policy of captaincy between Salah and Palmer can work very well up until game week 20. Let's now finish up this midfield with the likes of Mbeumo facing Everton away. I may look to sell him in a couple of weeks' time, but that certainly won't be the case in game week 12 or 13. He's facing Everton away and Leicester City at home. He could be a phenomenal captain in game week 13, but I'm not really considering him for this upcoming deadline. I think Palmer and Salah are above him in the pecking order this week, but football isn't played on paper, and there can be some surprises, and Mbeumo is capable of some huge returns. I do think he has slightly regressed with the return of Wissa, but it's a very small sample size, and towards the beginning of this season, both Mbeumo and Wissa were producing very healthy FPL returns. We certainly can't diminish Mbeumo's consistency, the underlying stats, and the fact he's on penalties, so I think he could be a long-term hold, even when Brentford's fixtures turn for the worse in game week 14. And finally, one of my transfers in could be Bruno Fernandes, but I'm also looking at Saka, who is currently yellow flagged as well. One of those two could find a way into my FPL team, and the sacrifice would be Phil Foden. That is risky because City face Tottenham Hotspur, and that could be a very high scoring game, and I believe Foden will turn things around. But with Fernandes playing under Ruben Amorim and the form he's showing since Erik ten Hag's sacking, I think Fernandes could get another big return against Ipswich Town and then Everton at home. Then it's some tough fixtures for Man United as discussed earlier, but Fernandes is a fixture-proof player and his goals and assist record is really consistent and incredible since he first played in the Premier League a couple of years ago. Another potential transfer could be Isak, and the one making way would likely be Dominic Solanke. It makes sense from a structural perspective. I think having one premium/mid-price forward is the way to go, and you can couple an Isak or Watkins, maybe even Jackson, alongside 2 budget forwards. You can still go for Erling Haaland, by the way, but this is my kind of favourite structure, and in most weeks I would play 3-4-3 and bench one of my midfielders, and in this case I think Semenyo will be the one likely dropping down to the bench, and you could even build a team with Fernandes and Saka at the same time, but you would have to get rid of someone like Mbeumo or Semenyo, and it also would probably mean no Isak or Trent Alexander-Arnold, to name a few other examples. You can't have everybody, but Isak facing West Ham at home is a great choice. He has scored in 3 consecutive games against Chelsea, Arsenal and Nottingham Forest. His form is incredible, and Newcastle are showing a bit of consistency now in the Premier League, so they could be fighting for the top 5 as well, and that could be enough to secure Champions League football next season. And my final player in the starting 11 would be Cunha away from home against Fulham. I'm not too convinced about the Wolves assets in game week 12, but I bought them for a reason, to target Southampton at home in game week 11 and also for the long-term fixtures, which continues for several months. So I'm very happy with these acquisitions, but I would definitely want to bench Aït-Nouri and possibly reinforce my defensive line. I do like Fernandes and Isak as long-term transfers, especially for game week 12 to be fair, but you could make a case that I need to prioritise my defensive line first and really bolster that position in game week 12 because Mykolenko and Aït-Nouri almost seem destined to blank. My provisional bench would be the following. Valdemar, who is the permanent backup goalkeeper. I should have gone for Fabianski, of course, and I would have started him in game week 11 had I gone there, but I made that mistake on the wildcard. Chris Wood, Lewis and Van den Berg complete the bench. I'm quite happy to bench Chris Wood on paper this week, but on the few occasions I've done so, he has scored and produced bonus points, and it wouldn't surprise me if he did that, but I've already got that double up in the Arsenal defence. I'm going to back Arsenal for the victory here, and I'd rather avoid these kind of conflicts if possible. I've only got just the one here with Mbeumo versus Mykolenko. That could be a bit problematic. I would favour Brentford to get the victory or at least score goals compared to Everton keeping a clean sheet. But let's see what happens in a few weeks' time because football, like I mentioned earlier, can be a funny old game. In terms of the captaincy, I'm looking at Salah with Palmer as the vice, but if I bring Fernandes and Isak in, they are right up there for the captaincy conversation, and I really back Isak to do extremely well this week. So if you are looking for a bit of a differential captain, Isak would be my top recommendation against a struggling West Ham side. I know they kept a clean sheet in Gameweek 11, and Fabianski is a very good choice at 4 million, but I just can't see Newcastle not scoring in this game. And Isak only needs one goal, a bit like Chris Wood, to get bonus points and a very healthy return as well. But I think it's between Salah and Palmer for me. I'm not looking too much into the yellow flags. That includes Phil Foden, who I'll likely sell if I make a midfielder transfer, with Fernandes and Saka being the top two replacements. I think long-term Saka is the best move, but I might go very aggressive and target what's right in front of me and also build upon Bruno Fernandes' incredible form, while Saka has been a bit hit or miss in the last couple of weeks. So I'm very happy with this provisional team, but I've still got some issues. I know Rico Lewis and Vandenberg on the bench isn't too shabby, but my defensive line overall has been in need of a revamp for quite some time. I bought Nuri in Gameweek 11, and ultimately, you want to make transfers in the midfield and forward line that has by far the highest ceiling, but sometimes bolstering your defense can be the best option for your FPL team. If you haven't already, check the link in the description below for Drafthound. I'd highly recommend it. I've been using it for over a year, so if you have watched my recent streams or videos, you'll probably be accustomed to seeing Drafthound, and a lot of you have been asking about it on all the social media channels for a good reason. It's a very great resource, which is very fun and intuitive to use. Now, their top recommendations for my transfers include Foden out for Fernandes, which is one of the transfers I discussed throughout this video. The second one is Palmer out for Fernandes, but I think that's mainly due to the yellow flag, and I think in a couple of days' time they'll probably change that because Palmer is a great option in the long term. And finally, Gabriel to Gvardiol, which I think from an attacking perspective could certainly result in some goals or assists and FPL points, but I do back Arsenal defensively more than Man City, despite both teams really struggling in recent weeks. So for me, the top recommendation is by far the best one. Foden out for Fernandes looks really enticing, and if I don't go for Fernandes and I sell Foden, it will be Bukayo Saka making way, and I think that'd be a great long-term move for my FPL team. Let's now look at the player rankings for the next 3 game weeks. So Salah is top with Fernandes, Haaland, Mbeumo, Son, Cunha, Gvardiol, Solanke, Palmer, and Isak. A very good top 10. I do think the likes of Son and Solanke will drop from these rankings in a few days' time, and we'll see Saka, if he's cleared, probably rise up the ranks and be in the top 5 very easily. But these algorithms and predicted points are all updated on a regular basis, so check out Drafthound in the link in the description below. For as low as £2 per week, you can try it out and see if it's to your fancy, and I believe you will like it if you are a seasoned FPL manager. And in terms of what they recommend for my team, in terms of the team selection, the captaincy, who to bench, this is what they've gone for. Lewis in for Nuri, Mbeumo as the vice captain, and Salah with the armband. The expected points goes up to 64.5, and if we go back and make the transfer and bring in Bruno Fernandes with Phil Foden, the expected points goes up to 66.6, and he would be the vice captain as a result. And if I also bring in Isak for Dominic Solanke, things will get very interesting indeed. So let's go here to Isak and bring him in for Dominic Solanke, and we'll see another improvement in terms of predicted points. So 66.8, not too high actually, but I think there will be a bigger improvement. Isak is one of the best options up front, and I've recommended him for several weeks now. The same goes for Bruno Fernandes. Just go back to the Gameweek 11 Transfers video. Both of them were highlighted as purchases in the Buy, Hold, Sell and Skip podcast. So I think there's a lot to be gained from those videos. And also, I should probably listen to myself because both of them would have been great transfers in the last couple of weeks. Let's now head over to fpl.team, the website, to visualize future game weeks and also alternative transfers I could make. Just to be clear, it's not 100% certain that I'll take a -4 hit. I'm just very tempted because I know I haven't taken any hits so far this season, but it could really work in the long term and also for immediate results with players like Isak coming in. But if I don't buy Isak and I want to get Saka as well, one possible alternative is to buy Danny Welbeck for Dominic Solanke. My only issue with this is I'll still probably end up selling Chris Wood to Isak at some stage this season, or going to Nicholas Jackson or another mid-price forward. So I've got 2.1 million in the bank by going for Saka and Welbeck for Phil Foden and Solanke, and the team would be very similar. The defensive line still isn't particularly great with Raya and Gabriel facing Nottingham Forest, Aitner and Mikalenko. If I make a transfer in the defensive line, it will likely be Kanate or Mazraoui, maybe even both, and that will be my -4 here, whilst keeping Foden and Solanke and hoping that Man City Spurs is a very high scoring game. So those are my transfer plans right now, and I'll have a clearer picture by the end of the international break. The expected points here is 58 with the -4 hit taken into account. It would be roughly 54, of course. So Salah will be the captain still and Palmer the vice. And I think in terms of captaincy alternatives, I'm not as high on Saka or Welbeck or all these options compared to Isak or Fernandes for Gameweek 12. So I certainly wouldn't be looking to captain any of the other options besides Salah or Palmer. So that's more locked in if I end up going for these moves instead. I do think Isak is right up there. I can't stress enough how highly I rate him, not just against West Ham, but also in future game weeks as well. And just a sneak preview of Game Week 13, and I'll talk more about this in upcoming videos. I could have this sort of setup. I've got a very weak defensive line still. I might even be forced to start Vandenberg against Leicester. It's a good fixture, and this may be Brentford's first clean sheet of the season, but I'm not really too confident in the Brentford defence. They concede so many chances, but I could have Raya and Gabriel away to West Ham. 8 Nuri against Bournemouth at home, which isn't too shabby, but Bournemouth have been good both home and away, especially in terms of creating chances and scoring goals. Mbeumo, Salah, Palmer and Saka could be the midfield, with Welbeck, Cunha and Chris Wood up front, who might even be my captain, but the alternative I think could be Cole Palmer. We'll talk more about this in upcoming videos, of course, because there's a long way to go for the Game Week 12 deadline, let alone Game Week 13, with all the injuries and suspensions we could get in between. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. I aim is to get this video to over 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks, the Discord server, FPL League, Drafthound, as well as Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It would go a long way to support my channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 12 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.